Hello, students. Professor Stevenson here. So this is my discussion leader video for discussion number 1. This week we read the first chapter in the Guide to Composition Pedagogies, the framework for success for post-secondary writing from the WPA Council, as well as the both of the documents from the NCTE and the three C's. So so they were all pretty interesting, all pretty introductory to me. Some of the things I found really notable were I really liked the Guide to Composition Pedagogies really kind of engagement with pedagogy. Like, in a lot of ways, the introduction really seemed like every chapter in their book, right, is like genre or whatever. Like, this chapter seemed like it was a chapter on pedagogy as opposed to like, here's an introduction. Clearly they get to that at the end, but I found it refreshing because they defined it and redefined it, and they kind of went over the stakes of it. So one of the things, one of the points that I found super interesting was the definition they made for composition. So they say composition pedagogy is a body of knowledge consisting of theories and research on teaching, learning, literacy, writing, and rhetoric, excuse me, and the related practices that emerge. It is deliberative integration of theory, research, personal philosophy, and rhetorical practice into composition instruction at all levels, from the daily lesson plan to the writing program and the communities it serves. So that's on page 3. It kind of morphs into not composition pedagogy because they think that most people operate through multiple pedagogies. So I thought that was really interesting. One of the points that they made that really, really kind of stuck with me is where they talk about pedagogy being rhetorical, and they really kind of hammered that home by being like, hey, you teach in different rhetorical situations. Like, even if you go from teaching a 7:30 in the morning class, which I often teach 7:30 in the morning classes, and then your last class is different. And it's different because, right, the rhetorical situation is different. Sometimes the rooms even, surprisingly, make the classroom situation so much different. When I teach in classes with big computers, and the computers kind of cover the students' eyes a little bit, and there's not a lot of flexibility to move rooms, you have to like kind of really, really try and be purposeful to get students up and walking around. So I thought that was interesting, the way that they talked about it being rhetorical. Let's see. So I do have a couple of questions first of all, what I would like all of you to do is, in your discussion post, that's my first question, is who are you and why are you here? What kind of experience do you have teaching composition? What kind of settings have you taught composition in? If you haven't, that's okay. What kind of settings do you imagine yourself teaching composition in? And finally, also, if you have been teaching composition in one setting, like, say for an example, you're a high school teacher and part of what you're doing in this degree setting is you're gaining credentials to teach composition in a college setting. So, like, what do you envision that's like? What kind of college do you want to teach at, and why, and all that kind of stuff. So that is like step 1, okay? And then step 2 would be, what the other question I had is C's framework for their C's statement on the C's statement and NCT's C's statement on the training of writing teachers. I'd like you all to talk about what's missing there. Is there anything missing? Or alternatively, if you were like, wow, it's perfect, what was missing in your writing teacher training that the C statement includes. And then finally, the framework for post-secondary writing by the WPA Council is really interesting because it includes these things called habits of mind, which might be old at this point because I want to say that the document, I don't have it right in front of me, but the document was put together in 2011. I'd like your thoughts on that, right? They have like curiosity, openness, metacognition. Why do you think that writing, for example, like they kind of give a little bit of a background why all those things are, but I'd like it in your own words too, as people who are either interested in teaching writing or studying teaching writing, or maybe you're forced to teach writing, or this is your career and your passion and your love, why those habits of mind, quote, would be included in teaching writing. Why are those kind of things that we're also trying to tap into, or that the WPA Council wants us to tap into and cultivate and strengthen in writers, right? So there's a bunch of open-ended questions. I will say that this first week's discussion board has a lot more like, here's a bunch of overview, here's 3 statements about writing teaching from our three anchored professional communities. So we have NCTE, National Counselors of Teachers of English, right? CEES, the College Conference on Communication. Again, I apologize, I don't have the acronyms right, but I don't have it in front of me. And then WPA Council is the Writing Programs Administrator Council, right? All of those are our 3 anchors. If I had to add a 4th, I would add teaching English at the 2-year college. TICA is what it's called. And we didn't read their statement, but we should have. But those are our anchors. And so we got this week these kind of policy statements from them about teaching of writing. And another thing I want to note too is these professional organizations make recommendations on a bunch of other things too. So like online writing instruction, or class size, or labor and workload for contingent faculty. And oftentimes they can be political statements for a department. They can be kind of leverage and advocacy for someone to go into their department and say, hey, like NCTE says class size should be this, or 4Cs says class size should be this. So why do we have a class size that's 10 more than 4Cs? Or for instance, the professional development thing on 4Cs I thought was really interesting, where they talked about how all faculty need to have free ongoing professional development. All long-term tenure track or non-tenure track faculty have to have access to it, and they should be doing it, right? So they are saying that right away, and they're making that statement. And alternatively, it's a place for department chairs and deans and provosts to go and look at and say, wow, this is the standard. And so another thing to pay attention is, as we get deep into the composition theorist readings, you'll start to see, like, I wish we had like a visual interpretation of this, but it would be like being able to lay over the theories together and kind of see how they have made up these guiding documents by the anchors in our field. So I asked a couple of questions, the big one being introduce yourself. This is a little bit of a weird week. Next week's leader video will probably be a little bit more weedsy into the readings. But this week, yeah. Awesome. Thank you for watching, and have a great week.